Our unit has a mandate to prepare a knowledge management strategy for our DG. And as there is no Commission-wide knowledge management strategy or policy, obviously in the process of preparation we were looking for examples of strategies in other organizations, good practices, and obviously their experience. So we have contacted a few DGs in the Commission which have developed their knowledge management approaches, and a number of external organizations. Asian Development Bank was one of them, and actually we're lucky because ADB has just adopted knowledge management strategy, or it's called Directions and Action Plan, earlier this year. Chris MacCormac, senior advisor at ADB, was actually driving preparation of the recent ADB knowledge management strategy, and he has kindly agreed to come to Brussels and share with us their experience and also advice that can be useful for preparation of DEVCO knowledge management strategy. We had a meeting opened by Deputy Director General Mr. Klaus Rudischhauser on the 4th of October, to which we have introduced colleagues from other DGs, and after that meeting Chris MacCormac has kindly agreed to give an interview so that we can share his experience and views with wider public, and I would like to invite you to watch this interview.
Hello, my name is Christopher MacCormac, and I'm a Senior Advisor for Knowledge Enterprise at the Asian Development Bank. I'd like to take this opportunity to speak to you a little bit about some of our recent work on setting out a new Knowledge Management Directions and Action Plan at the Asian Development Bank. People have often asked me, why did we feel we needed a new Knowledge Management Directions and Action Plan? Actually, in Asia, the scale and the complexity of many of the development challenges that are emerging are unprecedented. And this actually means that we need to look at new sources of knowledge to make sure that we are at the highest quality of knowledge provision, and also to think about looking at knowledge which is more focused perhaps away from single disciplines, but looking more interdisciplinary knowledge and intersectoral knowledge. That's one of the key reasons. The other couple of reasons are that Asia itself is interested in becoming a knowledge economy. And a modern knowledge economy, where knowledge in a sense becomes the central asset by which economic productivity is generated, the opportunity for higher wages, and to enable many of the countries to avoid the middle income trap. A third reason, important reason, is that Asia itself, over the past few decades, has demonstrated unprecedented success, for instance, at lifting people out of absolute poverty. And the challenges that the world faces, for instance, such as climate change, shall we say, improvements in economic and inclusive growth worldwide, these need to be achieved in Asia, and they are being achieved in Asia. And it's important that the rest of the world has access to the knowledge and the success and understands why Asia was successful. So we want the knowledge from Asia to be shared with the rest of the world as well. This has been an interesting exercise that I've been closely involved with for about the past 15 months. In March this year, we approved the new Knowledge Management Directions Action Plan, and the key thing now is to ensure bank-wide implementation. The action plan will be implemented over about the next 15 months itself, and we have strong support from the leadership of the institution. We do have the clear action plan, and now we need to roll it out, resource it, and keep it on track. And that's where we are today, and a large part of this, of course, will be working with our partners. So we're eager to develop knowledge-based partnerships with many other development finance organizations, even working with the private sector in some cases, and we look forward to working with the European Commission. I'd like to also mention that, of course, the knowledge management, the way we've structured it and the way we're going to implement it, is intended largely to benefit the developing member countries. That's important. That's the key goal, is using knowledge for greater development effectiveness. But in the process, of course, it actually helps the institution in the sense that the higher the quality of our knowledge work, the higher quality and recognition we have for our knowledge management, and our knowledge products, our signature knowledge, the reputation of the institution, the Asian Development Bank, will also increase. There's also an advantage for individual staff. Staff like to work for an organization that is renowned for what it can do and for what it can achieve. And so many of the staff in the bank are eager to, in a sense, demonstrate and show that they have knowledge capabilities, perhaps more than have been used or demanded from them in the past. And they're keen on working with their colleagues in this institution and with other centers of excellence to make known their capabilities and the capabilities of their colleagues and peers at the Asian Development Bank, and get some recognition which is due for what they're actually contributing in terms of their own knowledge work. Some of the key elements of the knowledge management directions and action plan that we've set out are basically the following. We're working harder to prioritize. We have, of course, there are a lot of demands on ADB for what kind of knowledge work we should be doing. We have many clients. They'd like us to do many things, but we have to prioritize. And so that we put in place a more rigorous system by which we will look at the knowledge work that we plan in individual countries for certain sector and thematic areas and resource it well and resource it properly. But it also means that we want to stay with these priorities over several years and not just work on them for 1 or 2 years and move on to something else. We need to stay with these areas of priority and make them truly the signature areas that we want to develop. The other is, some of the other things that we've been working on are, for instance, improving the quality of our own capabilities to generate and share knowledge. So we've basically been working very hard to support what we call communities of practice at ADB. We have about 15 communities of practice, and these, we're truly trying to make them communities of practice. That is, in a sense, get them closely involved with the operations of the institution, but also making sure that they're far more knowledgeable than they have been in the past about what is happening in terms of development and development achievements, new knowledge, new development practices across Asia, but also globally. Our clients want us to bring not just regional knowledge, but also global knowledge into our operations. And so our communities of practice have been mandated and are being resourced to improve their ability to source knowledge globally as well as regionally and identify what's the right knowledge for ADB to bring in to its own development practices. We're also taking steps by which we can improve the management of our knowledge, learning from our operations, and doing a much better job at, shall we say, organizing and packaging and delivering both explicit and tacit knowledge from our own operations and from the skills and practices of our professionals in the institution. As in many large institutions and development organizations, there's a lot of tacit knowledge in the minds of the individual staff, but we need to find better ways by which we can extract that knowledge, organize it, and again, package it in such a way that it becomes signature knowledge areas, signature knowledge practices that we can put into our operations. And I think the fourth area that we've been working on is to build in greater incentives in the institution for recognizing and valuing knowledge work by the staff. Investment operations are always important. They're paramount in many ways. And in the past, staff have largely felt that those who are involved in the investment operations and who bring in the big projects are basically those who have a certain advantage in terms of career progression. What the institution is doing now under the new knowledge management directions and action plan is changing that, remedying that. We're going to bring in much more of a talent management approach to our human resources, and we are going to recognize and reward staff who are very, very good in knowledge areas and help them build a career around their knowledge work at the institution. One of the things that we've also done with respect to the improving the institution's, shall we say, incentives, but also its expectations for knowledge management at the bank, is that now individual staff and individual units in the institution have to set out in their work plans and their work programs what their roles and responsibilities will be for knowledge work, including knowledge management in the institution. And so part of the performance appraisal will depend upon their own success and the extent of responsibilities that they've taken on and how well they can take those responsibilities on in terms of, shall we say, generating new knowledge products, taking their tacit knowledge and putting it into an explicit form, sharing it with their colleagues, applying it to the operations of the institution. And this is something which is fairly new. in terms of having it in such a formal way, but we think it provides an incentive and will give greater and clearer recognition across the bank for the knowledge management capabilities of individual staff, but it'll also help the bank understand where some of further training and capacity development of staff is required in certain areas of knowledge management. And so, in a sense, the performance evaluations will reveal that. And we think this is an excellent way in which we can tailor certain staff development programs in order to improve the knowledge capabilities and the knowledge management practices of all of our staff. The knowledge management directions and action plan has some very practical, of course, aspects to it, which is absolutely essential. Because we've been discovering that, for instance, our country directors and staff at the resident missions are very knowledgeable about the countries in which they work, and rightly so. They need to be. But in many cases, the demands that are coming to us from the countries with which we work they want to know what's happening elsewhere, in the region and globally. So our country directors, people in our resident missions, are coming back to headquarters or contacting their colleagues in other resident missions and saying, what are the best development practices that are taking place in your country? How have you dealt with certain issues? And in a sense, that's very, very important. So that is why we need to build up a very excellent body of explicit and tacit knowledge at headquarters, which we can share very quickly and well with country directors in any of the resident missions. So the evaluation office is an important resource and a way of learning, and it provides, shall we say, another perspective on what we think we know from our operations. Our operations, conducted by our regional departments, they undertake a lot of their own analysis and knowledge work around the efficacy of their operations, and they're a great resource in terms of learning, in terms of new development practices. But at the same time, the evaluation department can also provide another perspective. It can be, in a sense, a broader perspective. It can be a higher level perspective. It can take a look at how we're doing compared to other countries or other institutions in the region, or even globally. So from a knowledge management perspective, even if you have an independent evaluation department, don't think of them as being independent from knowledge, because they're not. One of the initiatives that we have taken under the new Knowledge Management Directions and Action Plan is to establish a Knowledge Sharing and Services Center. And this is a select group of staff, not a large unit. What they do is they examine a lot of the results of our operations, of the best practices that we undertake and others, and they begin to also distill what they see as the important explicit and tacit knowledge that needs to be packaged and put into certain forms and made available to ADB, to our borrowing member countries, and actually they make a big contribution to South-South knowledge sharing. They actually help convene meetings of knowledge practitioners in the various countries in which we work, and they put together the material and make it available as a resource for sharing across the various member countries. So having this kind of group who can go in and support people in the operations and even in the specialized knowledge units who may not have enough time all the time to basically sit back and look at everything that they're doing and distill the best lessons learned. Having a specialized group go in and help them and do that, I think, is an important part of the success of the new Knowledge Management Directions and Action Plan. And I would encourage you, if you're undertaking your own exercise, to think about establishing that kind of group within your organization.